Hello and welcome to the news to present. My name is Jeffrey Gamble. The headlines. Mopani Copper Mines has announced plans to close some of its operations, which will result in the loss of over 4,000 jobs. Government has been called upon to consider putting on hold the implementation of the remaining 25% increase in electricity tariffs. The news in detail. Mopani Copper Mines has announced plans to curtail some of its operations, which might affect about 4,700 direct jobs. In a statement obtained by Q News, company public relations Nebet Mulenga says it has become necessary for Mopani Copper Mines to curtail some areas of its operations due to the restrictions of power by Copperbelt Energy Company. Mr. Mulenga says the decision has been necessitated by the unilateral action by CEC to restrict power supply without notice and against the provisions of the power supply agreement. He explains that the mining firm is operating under a power supply agreement dated the 31st of March 2000, which was mostly recently amended on the 6th of March 2015 and is valid until 2040. He says efforts to compel CEC to abide by the power supply agreement have unfortunately been ignored and that the company is prepared to continue to follow the process as underlined in the agreement. He says although the mining company will work on optimizing the use of the limited power that it is receiving, it expects that it shall effectively have to close several areas and that scaled back operations may affect a total of 4,700 direct employees. Mr. Mulenga says the company is engaging with the unions and other stakeholders to see how they can mitigate the effects of this unavoidable course of action. Opposition political parties have continued to express their displeasure over the content of the political parties bill, which is due to be presented to Parliament during the next sitting. The Movement for National Transformation (MNT) and the Patriots for Economic Progress (PEP) both feel the final draft bill needs to be redrafted. MNT President Daniel Shimunza says the draft that was copied from Kenya needs to be redrafted so that it is reflective of the national character and the state of Zambia's democracy. Mr. Shimunza says it also needs to be redrafted to ensure the ruling party is also made accountable and not just opposition parties. He states that the bill is biased towards the ruling party.
This proposed political parties draft bill 2017 has got a lot of challenges. First of all, it is not contextualized to the Zambian democracy. It is a copy and paste of the Kenyan political parties draft bill. Now, 53 years after independence and since 1991 when we became a multi-party democratic state, we need to contextualize our democracy to become mature. The drafted proposed bill that will be presented to Parliament is not a good document so far. First of all, it has a challenge insofar as it making the ruling party not having any checks and balances, but it will actually come out like the ruling party is controlling political players. And so for us as a Movement for National Transformation, we are making a statement to the fact that it has to be redrafted, it has to be contextualized. The president, as well as the minister to whom we can lodge our annual reports and our appeals according to the drafted bill, are stakeholders that have their own political parties. And so there are no checks and balances on their part, but the checks and balances in the content document.
And PEP President Enoch Tembo says the provision for state funding for political parties must explicitly exclude the ruling party and the main opposition political party. He says this is because these are already well-established parties and do not necessarily need to be subsidized by the state. Mr. Tembo says his party is hopeful that the upcoming Zambia Center for Inter-Party Dialogue, ZCID, organized stakeholder consultation on the draft political parties bill will help address all the lacunas in the draft bill and that the Ministry of Justice will incorporate the feedback into the draft bill to produce the final version that will be presented to Parliament.
Basically, we are concerned by certain provisions in the political parties bill, especially the provision with regards to funding of political parties. There is a term in the provision which basically requires that only political parties that have presentation in Parliament would be funded in terms of the current draft bill. We believe that provision is retrogressive because that would basically only advantage the ruling party, which is the PF, and the main opposition, UPND. So the entire funding basically would be split between those two main political parties. And our view is that the purpose of this political party funding should be to enable upcoming political parties to basically be able to mobilize members and have a starting point. It is not supposed to be meant for already established political parties such as the ruling party or the main opposition. It is the same concept when you look at issues like the social cash transfer. The social cash transfer cannot be used to be given to people who are already well off in society, well-to-do people. It is given to poverty-stricken people who are really bottom in terms of a income bracket.
The Zambia National Union of Teachers, ZANUT, has advised teachers across the country to ignore reports suggesting that teachers have been awarded a salary increment starting this August. ZANUT's spokesperson, Joe Kasaka, has told QTV News that the union is receiving a lot of phone calls from teachers across the country asking about the same purported increment. Mr. Kasaka says the increment is not feasible as the negotiations with government have not yet been concluded. And Mr. Kasaka says the union supports the move by government to split the University of Zambia into university colleges as this will promote efficiency. He says this will make it easier for management to monitor the operations of the university colleges and avoid some of the common challenges at the same institution.
We've received a lot of phone calls from our members out there who are saying there will be salary increment in August. What we want to tell our members is that the negotiations have not yet been concluded. We are still negotiating. You know, these negotiations have protracted, and this has happened only for the first time ever since we started doing the negotiations. So we are optimistic that in the near future we may conclude these negotiations. But otherwise, as for getting a salary increment this August is not feasible as far as we are concerned. Then on the issue of the splitting the university into university colleges, the University of Zambia in particular, where they are saying they should split them into 5 university colleges. That idea is a very good idea because it will promote what is known as efficiency, and it will also improve on the quality of results that are going to be produced from the University of Zambia. It means there will be concentration in each of these colleges that are going to be split.
Government has been called upon to consider putting on hold the implementation of the remaining 25% increment in electricity tariffs, considering that the 50% increment effected on May 1st, 2017 has proved to be a challenge for most people. UPND Chairman for Rural Reconstruction and Development, Mono Mapani, says most people are already struggling to survive, wondering how they will manage with the pending 25% increment expected to be effected next month. Mr. Mapani says if people living in urban areas are struggling to buy ZESCO units, it is worse for rural dwellers. He says it is not too late for the government to find an alternative to this pending challenge before it is effected. Mr. Mapani says there is need to understand that not all Zambians can afford to buy electricity at a higher price.
And if this is how we are going to go, believe me not, one, even schools will not manage to pay for electricity. The hospital already they are finding it very difficult. And what more the general public, when we know that a lot of our citizens are not working, and you have a deliberate policy that you want actually to electrify in the rural setups. If the people who are seen to be getting something, that's the working classes, are failing, what more the ordinary people in the rural setups? I want to appeal to the people responsible. Please consider what is happening to the people of Zambia. If we are going ahead to increase this electricity tariffs, you are going definitely to kill a lot of people. And no one is interested to see that thing. We had a lot of lands, because always the excuse has been we had poor landforce. The excuse has been we cannot manage. We have been seeing government opening new hydropower stations. What does that mean? Because all what we expected was to have electricity throughout the day at a reasonable rate.
Small-Scale Farmers Development Agency, SAFADA President Boyd Mobwe has appealed to Agriculture Minister Dora Silia to grant small-scale farmers export permits to enable them export maize in view of the low price being offered on the local market. Speaking in a walk-in interview, Mr. Mobwe says small-scale farmers should be allowed to export maize instead of selling the produce at a low price on the local market. He says small-scale farmers have 50,000 tons of maize which they can export if granted permission. Mr. Mobwe has since appealed to small-scale farmers to hold on to their maize produce until government comes up with a solution that benefits them. He has urged the Agriculture Minister to take up the matter seriously to serve the interest of small-scale farmers. Home Affairs Minister Stephen Kampyongo says Zambia will prioritize applications of Zambians living in the diaspora that would want to restore their lost Zambian citizenship. Mr. Kampyongo says priority will be given to Zambians that have renounced their citizenship in preference to other countries due to circumstances. Speaking at the Zambian Chancery in Pretoria, South Africa, when he addressed Zambians living in that country, Mr. Kampyongo says the dual citizenship clause enshrined in the Zambian constitution has since been operationalized after extensive consultations with various stakeholders. He says the Citizenship Board and its Secretariat have put in place to speedily process applications for the registration of Zambian citizenship using a digitalized system in collaboration with the Department of National Registration. He has said that the digitalization of the two institutions would centrally restore biometric data and hence remove the delays and inconveniences that people used to experience in the past. Mr. Kampyongo has since encouraged those with intentions to acquire dual citizenship to take advantage of the favorable laws put in place to ensure they do not lose out on their natural inheritance of belonging to Zambia. This is contained in a statement issued by First Secretary for Press and Public Relations at Zambia's High Commission to South Africa, Naomi Nyawali. Government says it has accelerated measures aimed at increasing access to safe and clean water and sanitation services for all Zambians. Water Development, Sanitation and Environmental Protection Minister Lloyd Kazia says the measures are aimed at averting exposure of Zambians to waterborne diseases, especially in peri-urban areas such as Misisi Compound. We have more in the following report.
Improved access to clean and safe drinking water can reduce diarrhea and waterborne diseases. It is for this reason that the people of Misisi Compound in Lusaka can breathe a sigh of relief following the launch of the 2 million kwacha Misisi Water Supply Improvement Project to be undertaken by the Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company in close collaboration with the water and sanitation of the urban poor. Launching the project, the Water Development Minister Lloyd Kazia said government has accelerated measures aimed at increasing access to safe and clean water and sanitation services for all Zambians. He says such measures are being undertaken because government is cognizant of effectiveness of sustainable management of safe and clean water as key to people's improved health and accelerated national productivity.
Under the able leadership of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zambia, Mr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, has commissioned in order to address challenges of water supply and sanitation for the people of Zambia. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to stress that my government remains resolute and focused to take development to the people, and development we are witnessing today in Mrs. Compound indeed. A demonstration of our commitment as government to ensure that adequate access to clean and safe drinking water for all Zambians becomes a reality.
And speaking at the same event, Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company Managing Director Jonathan Kampata said non-payment of water bills and vandalism are major impediments to the effective function of the water utility.
Lusaka Water and Sewerage Water Master Plan. We are currently implementing various projects aimed at improving access to water and sanitation services for all. Apart from the 3 well-known projects, which are the Kafue Bulk Supply Project, the Lusaka Sanitation Program, and the Lusaka Water Supply, Sanitation and Drainage Project, which is commonly referred to as the Millennium Challenge Project, the company is implementing a number of projects specifically covering the peri-urban areas. Some of these areas include Kabanana, Baulen and Chainda.
The Lusaka Province Minister Jafen Mwakalombe and his counterpart for Chiefs and Traditional Affairs, who is also a Chawama Member of Parliament, Lawrence Chalwe, urged residents of Misisi Compound to guard the facility against any form of vandalism.
Improving access to clean water and sanitation, save services in peri-urban, the settlement of Lusaka is a commendable job and is in line with Sustainable Development Goal number 6. This will reduce diseases burden, consequently improving productivity of our residents. Honorable Ministers, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, let me take this opportunity as a Minister for the province of Lusaka Province to thank the cooperating partners, Lusaka Water and the Sewerage Company, and in line with the 9 ministries for making this project a reality.
To the people of Mrs., I would urge you, or I would amplify on what the drama group emphasized, for you to guard this project jealously against the vandals. Indeed, this project should have been completed way back, but it had to be delayed because of some vandals who were busy vandalizing the construction of this project. But I am pleased now that the project has come to fruition, and I would urge you to guard this project jealously.
And in Koloma Ward, Councillor Tasila Lungu has assured the residents in Misisi Compound of more developmental projects in both health and infrastructure. Ms. Lungu says the new water project will reduce the water challenges the residents have been facing, which have forced them to depend on Ngwenya Dam, which has proven to be a health hazard.
Market soon. The water is here, so there's a lot happening here. So we really have to sensitize them. We're working hard. Hand in hand with the police. Thank you so much.
The newly launched Misisi Water Supply Improvement Project is expected to deliver a 12 kilometers water distribution network connecting 100 households. The project will also result in 35 water kiosks being set up, as well as upgrading of communal taps. Alfred Mwansa, QTV News.
The Zambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Zaki, says there is need to walk the talk in economic diversification. Zaki President Michael Nyirenda says there is need to put in place policies that will support the diversification agenda. Mr. Nyirenda states that the country should embrace diversification as a means of growing the economy. He says the country's future development lies in diversification. Mr. Nyirenda has also noted the need for a market to be created for products and services that will promote diversification in the country.
In diversifying the economy in general, what lies top of our priorities must be agriculture. But as to what we have done, I think regrettably, all of us, I mean, with no exception, all of us, we have talked and talked, but we have done, I think we've not walked the talk, if one were to be candid. And the way to go will be, and this is I think where we need to walk the talk. And that starts from all of us. What we need to do is, of course, we may not do it overnight, but we need to make a start. And making a start means, in terms of our resource envelope, let's actually do what it needs or takes to actually diversify. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that even in terms of allocation, in terms of our resources, we need then to put more resources in terms of into our agricultural production, and also our policies must be seen to support agriculture.
The ruling Patriotic Front has implored civil servants to support government's efforts aimed at taking development closer to the people. PF Media Director Sunday Chanda has advised civil servants not to frustrate President Edgar Lungu's developmental agenda. He says the party is aware that not every civil servant may support the party in power. Therefore, it is important that the workers understand the party manifesto and developmental agenda of the sitting president. Mr. Chanda states that civil servants should work with the government of the day.
Because civil service serves the government of the day. And the government of the day is a government of President Lungu, the government of the Patriotic Front. Now, this government was put into office on the basis of a rich manifesto, rich on promises, very clear on delivery strategies. Civil service has a duty, therefore, to walk alongside and to understand the party manifesto. Now, this is the only demand that from our side as a party we are going to make to civil service, that more especially those ones who are involved in the formulation and even implementation of government policy must understand the Patriotic Front manifesto.
Former Chipata Mayor Jelas Piri has committed suicide. Eastern Province Commissioner of Police Alex Chilufya, who has confirmed the development, says Mr. Piri, aged 66, of a referendum compound in Chipata district, committed suicide by taking Doom pesticide. Mr. Chilufya says police has received a phone call from a passerby whose names are not known that as he was jogging at around 05 hours today at Chipata Primary School football grounds, he found a male person whom he suspected to be dead in a parked car. He says police rushed to the scene where the deceased was identified as Jelas Piri, 66, of the referendum compound. Mr. Chilufya says Mr. Piri, who also served as Local Government Association of Zambia Vice President, was found on the driver's seat in a car, and upon inspection of the body, it was discovered that foam was coming out of his nostrils and an empty container of Doom pesticide was found besides the body. He says the deceased was facing several cases of obtaining money by false pretenses and was on police bond in one of the cases. The Eastern Province Police Chief says the body of the deceased is in Chipata Central Hospital mortuary awaiting postmortem. Former Zambia National Students Union ZANASU President Prince Ndoi has urged the government to implement policies such as the Students' Loan Facility for university students before making new policy pronouncements. Mr. Ndoi told Q News that the feasibility of the recent pronouncement by government to restructure the University of Zambia is questionable. He says the decision to split the University of Zambia into university colleges will only result in the university losing the credibility it has on the continent and across the globe if the policy decision is not implemented. He has since discouraged the Ministry of Higher Education against coming up with policies that are not funded as they lack sustainability and only end up remaining at policy stage. Mr. Ndoi notes that government, through the Ministry of Higher Education, has been seen to make various pronouncements aimed at supporting the welfare of students, but these pronouncements have not been implemented.
Of late, the Higher Education Minister has made numerous pronouncements that perhaps have not appeared feasible to some of us, and where we raise concerns in terms of consultation. My view is that instead of making pronouncements that perhaps we do not even have the resource envelope to look into how feasible that arrangement is and the efficiency of, perhaps in the interest of efficiency, we must first of all find the money. So what we would like to ask the Minister of Higher Education and perhaps government is that what we must be concentrating on is to ensure that the students' loan facility is operationalized, because we continue to sing the same song. For 2 years now, we have heard that it has been approved by Parliament, it has been enacted, but there is no money that is going to students through that facility. So what we want to see is consistency of policies. I think there must be some way of looking back on Mwanawasa's government. I think the track record of Mwanawasa in terms of management of higher education, tertiary education, is very much exemplary as compared to what we are seeing of late. We hear pronouncements without money. What is the essence of pronouncing that we're going to do this if you do not have the money? So I'm urging the minister to be more consistent with what she wants to achieve. Most of the pronouncements we have heard of late are basically just pronouncements that are not in any way indelible or feasible. They are inept pronouncements, and it is worrisome. they must concentrate and ensure that the University of Zambia must not lose its credibility, because pronouncements that have no consistency, that will soon be changed by the next minister, it becomes confusing for people.
Bwana Mkubwa, Member of Parliament Dr. Jonas Chanda, says the pace at which the Patriotic Front government is going is on course in fulfilling the promise to creating 1 million jobs going by the infrastructure development projects being undertaken in the country. Mr. Chanda states that with government's policy of empowering local contractors with contracts, Zambians, especially the youths, will be assured of employment, thereby contributing towards the creation of 1 million jobs. Dr. Chanda has also noted that the PF government has in the last 1 year managed to revive the economy, as evidenced by the reduction in commodity prices such as melamine, while the kwacha has appreciated against major convertible currencies. He says the opposition should therefore give credit where it is due, instead of criticizing the government at all the time. Dr. Chanda says the PF government has managed to improve the country's economic fundamentals.
Announcements of creating over thousands of jobs, 1 million jobs probably over 5 years, which is very tenable, you know. All the major projects that we have mentioned, you know, if you talk about infrastructure projects, you talk roads, you talk about water and sanitation, you talk about hospitals, schools, firstly, they require labor, because the people who are coming are not coming with thousands of laborers from outside the country. So they require labor. And as you know, the government policy is very simple. 20% of all contracts in the country go to local contractors. So as we get these big projects being rolled out, our local contractors benefit. And those local contractors hire people. You see that, I don't have the exact numbers, but we know that once there's that economic activity, you give 20% of the contracts to local workers. I mean, local companies then enjoy. I can give you an example of the water and sanitation project, worth almost $500 million. 20% of that is $80 million. So we're talking about $80 million going to local contractors. The local contractors having that cash, they also be able to employ. And these projects are not like paper tigers on paper. They've been launched. You've seen the road projects being launched by the president all over the country. Township road projects. A lot of those, about 20%, even if it's Africa International doing it or China Engineering, but 20% of all that is going to the local contractors. And the local contractors are hiring their people. And when it comes to labor, you know, these projects, it's the local Zambians, the youths who are working on those projects. So what we expect is that as these projects get rolled out, a lot of our youths, I think, will get absorbed. And that is why you see this kind of development is not only concentrated in one part of the country, it's well spread. And that's why if you remember the president last time he was in Ndola, he said Lusaka contractors should not move to the Copper Belt, because that's a chance now for Copper Belt contractors and the youths and the women of the Copper Belt to also enjoy. The same way in Lusaka, when there are projects in Lusaka, it's the local contractors and the youths. Same way in Luapula, in Eastern Province, Western. So basically, I think one of the ways in which to grow this economy is to emphasize on infrastructure. We have a huge infrastructure gap. It's good for the...
To end our news, we'll take a look at the headlines once more. Mopani Copper Mines has announced plans to close some of its operations, which will result in the loss of over 4,000 jobs. Government has been called upon to consider putting on hold the implementation of the remaining 25% increase in electricity tariffs. That's all we had in our news. My name is Jeffrey Ziambo. Good night.